Guess you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit, and now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Hey folks, welcome to Inside the Numbers on Freewheeling Friday. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. All right, three things we're going to get over. Laura is doing her darndest to make sure she gets your questions, so it's up to me until she can. But we have a guest today later, not on the show, later today. Everyone's favorite should-be Congressman David is going to come and visit. So we're doing some stuff around here. But in the meantime, I will do my best to grab your Q and A's so we can get through them. All right, three things I want to get through today. One, I want to talk more about the status of basically the status of the overall states. We have the nomination polling nationally, and there's been a big argument. But, you know, we got to look at the states because the states are where the nomination happens. Listen, folks, for the millionth time, the states lag national polling. The national polling, for the most part anyway, now there's been some exceptions, but for the most part, states will follow the national trend. Now, there are some states where demographics are quite different. However, especially in these early states, they are not. In fact, they're probably more favorable to Trump in a couple of these states. So we're going to talk about the formula you would have to put together to beat Donald Trump in a nomination and how that formula is just not looking right. All right. But before we get to all of that, well, and two, now that we have measured on several, not many, I wouldn't say many, but on enough to speak about it. We're talking now about 5,000 interviews altogether throughout all the months. So we're not talking about a small sample size here. Measuring the first ones to try to measure what is the phenomena of the Trump or bust vote. These are voters that came out for Trump in 2016, came out for Trump in 2020, did not come out for Republicans in 2018, did not come out for Republicans in 2020, and likely will not come out, and many during the special elections, by the way, and likely will not come out if Trump is not the nominee. All right, that's just a fact, and we're going to go over it. All right. Now, the only question is for some people out there is whether or not that vote is bigger or smaller than this coveted suburban female vote, which I will argue is a fallacy for several reasons. All right. There are different kinds of suburbs. Is it really even the female in the suburb that's causing that's at the root of the Republican problem, or is it something different in the suburbs? Is it only a Trump problem, right? Who's even leading in the suburbs right now in general election matchups and in the nomination polling? And then is it every single suburban white woman, or is it the ones that we identified by simply asking a question? If Trump is the nominee, would you vote for him? If your guy is not the nominee, would you vote for him? So in order to measure the size of this vote, do we count every single suburban white woman who has a college degree across the country? Absolutely not. That's loser think from 2004. The suburbs don't look the way they looked in 2004, let alone in 8, let alone in 12, let alone in 16, let alone in 20. Demographics constantly change the electorate. And that constantly changes with the coalitions that support candidates. All right. So the only question is, would you vote for this guy or not? The hard, I will vote for this person, but not this person, is the vote that obviously is the relevant vote. And how big is that? How big is the I will vote for any Republican but Donald Trump vote? Forget about just suburban women. How big is the entire vote versus I will only vote for Donald Trump? That is the relevant question. The suburban white woman thing, if you're looking, listen, if you're a Republican and your primary voting, your primary decision on how you're going to vote comes down to the question of who can win back educated suburban white women, you will lose 2024. It's that simple. Were you not paying attention in 2022? Republicans generally did better with these people. The problem is you can win non-college by 30 points, but if they're 5, 10 more percentage points less as a share of the overall electorate, it will not be enough. And you will lose anyway, especially against somebody like Joe Biden, who actually, and I know a lot of Republicans don't want to hear this tough crap, it's just true, did better with working class, particularly even white working class, than some people thought he would do. Scranton Joe. You need these voters, and you need them to come out in droves. If they're looking at Joe Biden versus a traditional interventionist, corporatist kind of Republican, they'll go for Joe Biden. Don't point me to governor elections, gubernatorial elections. I don't give a damn. They're not predictive. Everyone in my industry who actually does this for a living and has been doing it for a living for years knows that gubernatorial elections have exactly zero predictive value when it comes to the presidential performance of a candidate. Zero. You think Larry Hogan, if he was the Republican nominee, would carry the state of Maryland? If Chris Christie was the Republican nominee, would he carry the state of New Jersey? That's funny because he's losing it right now to Donald Trump, 72-25. Does that show particular dominance or strength in a general election? Mitt Romney was the nominee in 2012. Did he carry the state of Massachusetts? No, he did not. If Bob McDonnell had been the nominee in 2012, even though he won the state of Virginia by the same margin that Ron DeSantis won Florida in 2022, would Bob McDonnell have carried the state of Virginia against Barack Obama? No, he would not. Gary Johnson, did he carry New Mexico, even though he was an extremely popular governor from the state of New Mexico, young, very libertarian? At the end of the day, in 2016, despite being a historically strong libertarian candidate, did Gary Johnson carry his own home state of New Mexico, which he won comfortably when he was the governor, a popular governor? Would Bradenson carry the state of Tennessee if he was the Democratic nominee? He was a popular Democratic governor. If he was the Democratic nominee for president, would he carry the state of Tennessee? No! He lost it in a Senate election. Badly. Partisan voting index is much, much stronger at the presidential level, and gubernatorial elections are the least predictive when it comes to presidential performance. And I could just keep going on and on. Connecticut, Rhode Island, on and on and on. Democrats have governed the state of Louisiana. Would John Bel Edwards be able to carry the state of Louisiana if he was the Democratic nominee? Enough said. All right, moving on. Let's take a look at the state of... I'm yelling. I'm just yelling. She thought I called her. No, I'm just yelling, Laura, just as always. All right, we've taken a look at the national polls. I do want to talk a little bit more about some of the demographics that we're seeing before we get into why the states are looking the way they are. Okay? And I think it's best if we tee it up with an article that I wrote on Locals the other day, all right, which is significant. And if you're on Locals, then you would have seen it. But if you're not on Locals, then you haven't seen it yet, and we need to discuss this, all right? Obviously, we're a long way off before voting starts, and I deal with that at the end of the article, that politics is, in fact, that a month in politics is a long time. It's an old adage, a couple of weeks, a month, or whatever. But the truth is there's a lot of flawed arguments being used right now. And there are, even this early, there are, in fact, several key indicators that are quite reliable at predicting not just Republican nomination, the party nomination. It's why Joe Biden, we'll look at him, how he's performing against Kennedy. Kennedy has increased quite a bit, but he's still, we don't have him as high as some of the other polls, but no doubt he has increased, but he is still obviously an overwhelming underdog. Joe Biden has almost everyone who is elected in Congress and in governor mansions. He's got countless endorsements. He is polling weak for an incumbent, but he is polling at a critical level in this shorter matchup. Before he was below it, but now he's exceeded it. And before I give it away, I know if you're on locals, you know where I'm going with this. Let me just read through it because it's going to tee up why this is so important with some of these polls. All right. And the chart that I actually inserted into this article just hits the tip of the iceberg to make the point. But we're going to look at an expanded version of that chart because, again, demographics. Why Donald Trump is heavily favored to win the Republican nomination. Trump has crossed two very historically significant milestones. I'll be discussing the subject matter in a lot more detail in the coming days on Inside the Numbers. Here we are. But it's noteworthy and needed to be introduced in an article on locals. After all, locals first. Donald Trump has secured more than 60 endorsements from elected Republicans holding national and gubernatorial office. I've heard it's possible he'll hit 70 by Sunday. I'm being by the end of the week, but by Sunday. Why does it matter? Given he didn't win endorsements and win with endorsements in 2015 and 2016, that's actually a bit of a misnomer. Obviously, Jeb and Cruz and all the rest of them got a lot more endorsements when it came to electeds, and certainly media outlets, right? But the truth is, Trump got a lot of endorsements. Some of them were just unconventional in the beginning. So obviously it was a different game. All right. So, but it's not true that he didn't get big ones. He did immediately. He landed Sarah Palin, which was huge. And why was it huge? Because Sarah Palin was still popular among the base, certainly the populist strain of the Republican Party, even conservative faith in flag strain of the Republican Party. And it was indicative. She was the vice presidential nominee for an ultimate loser who had been very much in the mold of Jeb and others, where Fox News and others were touting, you can only win with these guys. You can only win with these guys. Meanwhile, Sarah Palin is the only reason why polls even ever tightened in 2008 for a short period that it did. She certainly was good for a bounce for John McCain. But at the end of the day, people elect the top of the ticket. It's, marginal, the impact that vice presidents have, although, Lyndon Johnson is the strongest case. It is marginal. And she could not carry John McCain, who openly said during a financial crisis that the economy is not his strong suit. And then after that, in an attempt to fix it, he decided to put on a campaign stunt where he said, I will not campaign anymore until I deal with this crisis. It was a total stunt. It was seen as a stunt. It was an unpopular war. He was one of the biggest warmongers ever to set foot in the U.S. Senate. He was a loser. For starters, he did better with endorsements than most people realized in 2016, we're talking. Many early backers were on conventional endorsements, i.e. celebrities, sports figures, etc. But that's not even the central point. No candidate in over 4 decades has ever gone on to lose their party nomination with this many endorsements at this point. Yes, even this early in the nomination process. As I have stated over and over, despite what you hear from DeSantis supporters on Fox News and Twitter, which is their two, platforms that they beat the drum on, this narrative, it is not true that early frontrunners do not end up securing their party nomination, especially not when you arguably can consider Trump an incumbent rather than a non-incumbent. Why? The former president is certainly a known quantity on the national stage, and there is no uncertainty over whether he will weather the scrutiny that comes from being a top-tier candidate, both being key benefits of incumbency. Name recognition is a major benefit of incumbency. So when we say incumbent, what are the benefits that make an incumbent strong. Many of those benefits, except for holding the public office and being able to have access to the levers of power, Trump is, for all intents and purposes, a benefactor of those, or a recipient of those benefits of incumbency. And you can even argue that even though he's not in office, look at how he has been able to embarrass and outmaneuver DeSantis from his own home state of Florida to Iowa, where they go and get Terry Branstad, again, one of the longest serving governors in Iowa history, the longest serving governor in the longest Republican serving governor of any state in history. Was super popular, used to win in landslides when Republicans would lose Iowa to Democrats on the presidential level. And yet Trump still thrashed him in that endorsement contest, 2 weeks ago in the state of Iowa. But let's pretend for this discussion that we cannot and do not consider him an incumbent. And I need to refresh this because it says we cannot and do not consider. I had to edit that. Let's revisit that. There it is, fixed. We cannot and do not consider him an incumbent. Regarding the polling, it's a little more complicated. Though we're dealing with the same flawed assumptions among DeSantis supporters or surrogates, or we should really just say the non-Trump world, and the time frame is technically the same. While it's true, declared and potential candidates polling at around 20% at this point, which we talked about. We've been talking about this for 2 weeks, before DeSantis fell below 20% in our polling. It is true that candidates that poll at around 20% at this point typically have a roughly 20% chance of winning the nomination. There are mitigating factors at play this time. Trump's polling lead is not historically normal, even for a frontrunner. His dominance in our latest poll is a strong indication people are digging in their heels, as are the interviews I monitor, mode depending. Some of them I've shared with you all during the live show last week, remember? No non-incumbent candidate polling at or above 50% at this point has lost the nomination in the modern era. None. Yes, even this early in the nomination process. The oft-cited analogy to Rudy Giuliani, which we've heard a lot from people on Twitter, DeSantis influencers, whatever you want to call them, and others, not just DeSantis, but the non-Trump world, is grossly flawed. Rudy Giuliani never polled at these levels. And the link is right there. You are more than welcome to click on it and look at the totality of 2008 Republican nomination polls. In fact, in truth, he struggled to even hold a third of the primary vote before he lost the lead and eventually the nomination. Go look at it. And there were other candidates who were indeed polling at around 20% while Rudy Giuliani was in the 30s and had a significant lead. It was not this significant. The same is true of the equally cited example of Hillary Clinton in 2008. Again, feel free to click on the link. And what you will see is a very clear, close contest between her and Barack Obama at this point in the cycle. DeSantis is roughly 20%. Historical likelihood for prior candidates polling at roughly 20% is essentially rendered irrelevant by the fact that Trump is at 50% or higher. Do you understand what I'm saying? The window to seize on an opportunity to consolidate anti-frontrunner support has all but closed, if it hasn't been shut altogether. It's no longer a question of persuading Trump-fatigued voters. Now, Trump's primary opponent must change decided voters' minds. A far more difficult task. Again, now Trump's primary opponent must change decided voters' minds. A far more difficult task. And we'll get to this more in a bit. The DeSantis argument behind the scenes to donors, supporters, and the argument being made to him, even though there is word that he is getting weak in the knees on this, that he has reconsidered passing up. I cannot confirm that, but it doesn't matter because the argument, I know for a fact, that's how my good friend Steve Cortez got duped into committing career suicide. The argument they are making to him is that he will be hurt by these indictments, and that will change decided voters' minds. The arguments just keep falling away. We'll address it more in a bit. The Republican primary electorate is not a general election electorate. Working class voters will play deciding roles in several key early states. In our poll, our latest poll, Trump now enjoys his largest lead yet among this group, an astonishing 54 points, or 64.8 to 10.9. Among white working class, it's an eye-popping 58 points, 69.2 to 11.4. To put it plainly, folks, not enough of these voters are going to change their minds. His lead hasn't fallen below 30 points with this demographic to date. Even when Trump was at his low in our poll of 43 and DeSantis was at his high of 31, I believe, it wasn't because he lost the working class. It was still Trump plus 30 among non-college. It's that DeSantis had started to win 4-year degrees, not by that much, however. And postgrads too, he closed it, but in now polling, actually, he wasn't really ever, he was doing better with, if you separated college degree and you looked at the 4-year degree versus the postgrad, kind of funny because the female postgrads, which is totally against conventional wisdom, but it is the truth. Female postgrads did not bail on Trump the way that male postgrads did, and certainly males with a 4-year degree. In truth, Trump is stronger with female Republican primary voters than he is with males. Oh my God, broken brains everywhere. Because you're being sold a bill of goods that is a total lie. Trump's support, his strongest support, is with Republican females. They have been over 60 for a while now. He improved 10 points over the month with Republican men, and he went from 48 to 58. But females have been in the 50s and indeed crossed that. Say males aren't in the 50s. They're in the 60s. They're in the high 50s. Females pull Trump about 60. Remember that when we talk about the female suburban vote, as if it's like monolith and they're all the same or something. What they want you to believe is that you're going to win over. Go to Starbucks. Sit in the table. Sip your pipe tall, whatever. Sit at the Starbucks and watch who comes in over an hour or 2-hour period. That's who they think DeSantis or anyone not named Trump. That's the argument they're making. He's going to win that. That's bullcrap. It's not going to happen. No Republican's going to win them at the presidential level. Sorry to tell you. And there can be some swings with them because there are some that are still persuadable. But the truth is, it's getting to be a more Democratic demographic. Period. Full stop. Well, Rich, Glenn Youngkin did better in Chesterfield than Loudon. He still lost Loudon. And while he did better in Chesterfield, by the way, go look at the final vote result in Chesterfield. He did not do as well as people thought. Glenn Youngkin won because the mountain range came out at 19% of the electorate. Glenn Youngkin won because the working class, cultural conservative, cultural evangelical, working class, apprehensive right, populist right, faith and flag right, drove the share of the mountain vote from 16% to 19%. And he barely won. And Virginia's a funny case because Trump's vote total in Virginia is basically good to win any normal presidential year in Virginia. His 2020 vote total, arguably, if it was Hillary's total, it would have been a nail biter. And Biden's total is, to anyone, is just unbelievable. That leaves and by the way, let me just pop this open real quick. Here's your total voters. Here's your non-college, your white non-college, and evangelicals in here as well, which are 59.4 for Trump to 16.1. 4.1% is undecided. Please note how few people are undecided. Please take note of that because it's a big freaking deal. You have to convince decided voters to change from Trump to somebody else, whether that's DeSantis, whoever it may be. It is not simply a matter anymore of winning over the non-Trump vote. There are not enough non-Trump voters anymore. People have decided, and they decided for Trump. And I read you their interviews. I read you transcripts last week. Does that sound like Mike from Nutley is going to change his mind? Does that sound like Linda from New Manchester is going to change her mind? These were both voters who were DeSantis 2 months ago. That leaves the only viable path to defeating Trump, one that requires dominating among college-educated primary voters, which still requires a tightening among non-college voters. You got to get them down to like 15. But even among college-educated primary voters, Trump's support has steadily improved since January of 2023. He now leads with college voters by a margin that mirrors his floor with non-college voters. Let me say that again. And let me go back and actually repeat what I said right before reading that. In order to beat Trump in a Republican nomination, you have got to get his non-college vote below 30 at least, into the teens, and then dominate with college-educated voters. Especially because why? Because of how these states demographically line up and who votes in primaries. In a Trump era, the Republican primary electorate is no longer dominated by college whites like it was with Mitt Romney. It was difficult for Rick Santorum, Newt Gingrich to do that, to beat that, even though Newt Gingrich beat him in South Carolina. That's what I'm saying. We're going to talk more about this as well, that DeSantis isn't even, and others. Well, Nikki Haley, I can't fault her. She is. She's in a lane that she thinks is going to open up enough that if DeSantis and Trump fight over the MAGA lane, she's going to be able to grab enough moderates and liberals, right? Unfortunately for her, the moderate liberal lane is only 30% roughly. And unfortunately for her, DeSantis is trying to out-Trump Trump in Trump's lane, which is 70% almost. And DeSantis is only garnering 15 to 18% of that. So again, it solidly puts Trump in a majority. You have to convince people who are supporting Trump right now to change their minds. It's much more difficult to do that. All right. Trump's support has steadily improved since January 2023 with college voters. He now leads with college voters by a margin that mirrors his floor with non-college, his floor being about 30 points. He now leads DeSantis with college voters by that margin. The margin in January 23, 43-31. Trump had 30% of the working class vote. 30-point lead with non-college voters. And DeSantis was not able to demonstrate that he could win the college vote by that much to beat him. But it was at that point, well, can we prevent him from getting 7 more percentage points? I don't know that you can if he is now winning. I don't know. You can't. Now that he's winning college voters by the margin that really you needed to win them by. And he's above 50. Which again is statistically significant. It's a shame that enough pollsters and so-called pundits and election experts don't explain to viewers and listeners the importance of when someone is above 50%. It's 101. And it's not just the polling. The endorsement milestone is significant because now there are not one, but 2 key indicators for predicting presidential nominations heavily favoring the former president. Endorsements tend to snowball. Hence the major endorsement from NRSC Chair Steve Daines of Montana. Folks, go to the endorsement tracker right now. Trump is dwarfing him. And these are not small endorsements. That all being said, it's unclear what they will throw at this guy next. It's possible one of these ahistorical legal attacks finally land a blow. But the Limbaugh rule has held for nearly 7 years. And we should all be very skeptical of any outside influence's ability to break the deep connection Trump has with Republican voters. If he remains loyal to them, there's little reason, as in there's zero reason. We have zero reason to believe they won't remain loyal to him. P.S. I've added more to the crosstabs for locals, which what's called we're going to go over in a little bit. Let's talk first before we get into some states, which I want to do, and I want to do this before the break, so we're pushing the break for a minute. College versus non-college. Here we go. If the Republican primary for the presidential nomination was held today, for whom would you vote? We didn't include the someone else. It's irrelevant when the front runner is this high with so many of these. You see the total there in the crosstabs, right? From the crosstabs. Non-college, we talked about. White non-college, we talked about. We didn't even separate white. Look at some college associate, which is becoming a massive share of the electorate. 65.5% to 14.6%, below DeSantis's national average. 4-year undergrad, 52.5% to 21.5%. Once DeSantis's strongest group. Advanced and postgrad, 52.1% to 22.1%, 30 on the button. In January of 2023, when we had Trump at 43-31, his lead with non-college voters was the same margin that it is now with the advanced post-grad lead that he has over DeSantis. You understand what's happening here? Am I explaining this? This is not a historically normal polling lead for an early frontrunner. This is an extremely dominant, historically large, no candidate has gone on to lose kind of lead. There is the example of Ted Kennedy in 1980 against Jimmy Carter, but Ted Kennedy never hit 50%. His average high was 45, and then there were events that cratered him. But 1980 was a different time. We had the Iran-Contra scandal. While it made Carter look weak to the general electorate, and Reagan, rode that crap like a surfboard, dude, catching a wave. For Democrats, they circled the wagons in the primary, even though they wound up abandoning Carter of 20% for Reagan, over 20% in the actual general election. In the primary, Carter lost some states, but he wiped the floor with Kennedy. And then there were issues about Kennedy's background that came out. There were things that went on. It was a different year, a different time. Kennedy was not vetted. Again, I have to point this out. Kennedy was a senator, but he was not vetted on the national stage as only a presidential candidate gets vetted. 2 days ago in the New York Times, they argued DeSantis' bump already happened. It's over. I have to wonder if that's true. I have to say that I lean toward agreeing unbelievably with the New York Times. Because there is a certain level of scrutiny that a presidential candidate gets. He could be a governor. He could be a senator for years. Or she. They could be the first lady of the United States and then go on to be a senator from New York and then the Secretary of State to put on a record for most miles traveled as a Secretary of State and still not receive the scrutiny that they will get when they are a presidential candidate. DeSantis got a whiff of that scrutiny and he collapsed. A whiff. The tip of the iceberg. We all know, or at least we, meaning everyone in this business, we all know that the New York Times has stories that they're holding back just in case he pulls off a miracle and beats Trump. We all know that. But there's a lot more. And I would argue it's not even anything in his past that'll hurt him particularly. Some stuff just reaffirms or what's the word? Like Hillary, the WikiLeaks email things didn't per se hurt her. They just reaffirmed what people thought or suspected about her. Same thing with the media, nothing new. The media is crooked. They collude with the Democratic Party. By the way, they stole that word collusion because it was associated with them and the media and the Democratic Party and the media when it came to after WikiLeaks. So they took that and tried to redefine the word in nomenclature. So you would, every time you hear collusion, you think Russia, 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 instead of what you would have thought of before the 2016 election in October. You would have heard the word collusion and you would have thought of, oh, the media, their relationship with the Democratic Party. All right. They collude to defeat Republicans. Jake Tapper and his producer colluded with the Clinton campaign and the DNC when Donald Trump and Ted Cruz were being interviewed by CNN on a foreign policy discussion. Not a town hall, but a discussion. Yes, I know a lot of people want to talk about Trump's town hall. I'll try to get this in as much as possible when we talk about the Trump or bust vote. All right. Because I'll explain what the risk was, what the reward was. And again, I hear people say things like, oh, yeah, I guess he was all right, but that didn't win over a single suburban white voter. So a suburban female voter, woman. Then you are in a box the media wants you to be in. And the, frankly, establishment Republicans, that never back down pack statement by the DeSantis campaign looked like it was written by Jeb's advisors in conjunction or in collusion with somebody from the Lincoln Project, and then the CNN panel not named Byron. What they put out was a disgrace to Republican voters, an insult to Republican voters, and they drew a line. And if you think that winning over the suburban white female was the goal of going on that CNN town hall, then you don't understand what's going to take to win 2024. That was not the upside. We're going to look at the upside next. And then, I got to take a break. Crap. The upside was to win over a different voter, because you can't count on the suburban female voter to come back to you ever in the numbers that you think they're going to come back to you. You need to overwhelm them with a different coalition. Coalitions are always changing. Maps are always changing. And due to the census, by the way, they have changed to favor Donald Trump to win if he follows this playbook. If he tries to follow the suburban white woman playbook, he's going to lose. And so would every other Republican nominee. I can show you and prove that to you by looking at the 2022 election. All of them together can't get 74 million votes, let alone what they're going to need to get to beat Joe Biden in 24. All right, let's take a real quick break. And when we come back, we'll discuss the Trump or bust vote. All right. Are you ready to protect your family from a blackout? Authorities fear extremists are targeting the U.S. power grid. That's according to Time magazine, not the People's Pundit or Breitbart News. If just 9 key substations go down, it could knock out power across the country for up to 18 months. We're talking about your life being frozen in time the moment the power goes out. That's why you need a solar generator. The new Patriot Power Generator 2000X. It's portable. It's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, even your refrigerator. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and get one for 10% off if you use the code TPP10 at checkout. This code is, of course, for your first purchase, right? That's 4patriots.com. Use the promo code TPP10 to get your Patriot Power Generator today. All right. You know what? Yeah, let's also roll through this puppy. Yeah. This way, because we have questions I want to get to. Let's roll through this puppy. Our folks at Jam & Bean, a great offer. Of course, I want to tell you about it. Companies run by patriots, but they're also artists in the art of coffee roasting. Whether you're like me and you like to roast your own bean, or not roast your own beans, but you like to grind your own freshly roasted, actually well-roasted coffee and then brew it. Or sometimes you're just in a rush and you have no choice but to grab a K-Cup. They got something for everybody. All right, you go to jamandbean.com, JAMN as in Nancy, bean.com. And if you get a new subscription now and use the promo code TPP40, you will get 40% off your first subscription. Plus, you will still get the 10% off for being a People's Pundit viewer, watcher, listener, whatever it is. That's jamandbean.com. Use the promo code TPP40. That'll get you 40% knocked off right off the jump. And then you will still get 10% off on subsequent renewals each month when your subscription renews. jamandbean.com, TPP40. All right. Let me know how the maple syrup is. All right. I still haven't gotten mine. I need to get my maple syrup. And of course, when it comes to both of them, whether it's for Patriots or Jam and Bean, send us your feedback. We want to hear all about it. All right. I want to hear your favorite popcorn flavors. What roast do you like at Jam and Bean? I want to hear all about it. Send it to Laura and I. All right. Time to get into the nitty gritty of this. The nitty gritty. After some 5,000 interviews. Which is bigger? The Trump or bust vote. Oops, wrong one. Sorry. Son of a gun. Is it this? Nope. Where the hell is this graphic? Nope. Visimometer. Oh, right. I remember. Okay. Bear with me. 1 second. It wouldn't generate. That's right. Hold on. Hold up. Because I put in Kennedy. And I may need, oh, no, here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Is this it? Yeah. Okay. So there are two that I want to show you. And let me open this with preview, send it to, bear with me because I got to send it to the desktop. But there are, move to desktop. There are two that I want to show you. And one is a percentage. But then I want to show you what that means with the percentage, okay? Because the percentage is one thing, and that's interesting. It's fine. That's interesting. But you need to know, okay, what that percentage represents when it comes to the overall electorate in order to determine truly which one's bigger, right? You understand what I'm saying? So 10% of 100 is 10. 10% of 15 is 1.5. Big difference, right? Exactly. So we're going to go over the percentages first, and then we're going to talk about how many people we're actually talking about here. How many voters are we actually talking about? Let me pull this up. Come on, come on, come on. Specific, and that's what it is. And we have to look. The only way to do that is to look at the cross tab. I was trying to make this really cool packed bubble chart because it shows you distribution and proportion. But I don't think it really shows it enough. And I'll show you here. I mean, I'll show it to you, but I don't think it really says it all. I really don't. All right. Candidate-specific support. Oh, crap. No, I was supposed to show you the states first, wasn't I? Doesn't it make sense to show you the states first before we get into this? I guess it kind of does. When you're looking at those demographics the way we were looking at them before, I go on Bannon. I tell the viewers that here's Florida. You want the first look at it other than locals? Because locals, you knew about it. I told you about it. Here's the Florida margin when it's all together. Is everyone, the crowded group. Here's the Florida margin when it's the two-way push. I get off War Room. I get a bunch of hate mail and nasty tweets about Trump isn't beating DeSantis in Florida, blah, 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 right? And then yesterday, a poll comes out in Florida showing Trump beating him by exactly the same margin. Almost. And there was no two-way push that I know of in that one, but obviously very close. Then we have Texas, and I told Bannon too and others about what Texas looked like, and you guys haven't seen it yet. Well, locals, I think you heard it. I think you did. The book club definitely did. And by the way, has not changed that much since the book club. And you're going to see it right now. And then yesterday, a poll comes out in Texas showing a very similar result. Only we do have Trump a little higher. We have DeSantis around the same amount. All right, so here it is. National, there's Florida. When it's the full core, everybody. Everyone who's in the national ballot, when we ask, that's someone else combined, all of those other candidates, they get 11.9%. All right. Trump is at 47.8, DeSantis 35.8. Trump is beating DeSantis among Hispanics in Florida by basically a 23-point margin, 56 to 33. if you round. It's like 55.8 to 33.3. I think it's on the dot. All right. When you push them to pick either Trump or DeSantis, Trump rises from 57.8 to 47.8 to 57.6, almost a full 10 points. DeSantis rises as well, but by fewer percentage points, 35.8 to 40.7. The margin among whites is closer, but non-whites is a blowout. Only 1.7% are undecided. So look at the undecided from Florida with the full ticket, the full ballot, and then the two-way. With everybody on the ballot, there are 4.5% who are undecided. When you push them and you only give them Trump and DeSantis, the undecided number falls from 4.5 to 1.7. So basically almost 3 full percentage points. And most of that goes to Donald Trump. In fact, there's someone else. Most of it goes to Donald Trump. He increases in the push twofold. Support over Ron DeSantis. I went to Florida first because I really consider looking at the national numbers. The demographics, the leads are so significant. The only question to me was, what is Florida? Because the other states are going to be an absolute blowout. North Carolina's a blowout. Ohio is a blowout. Even Pennsylvania now is a blowout. What is Florida? It's his home state. If he's going to be competitive despite trailing by 40 plus points nationally, what is Florida? He does better. It's his strongest state by far. It's still a blowout. When you put, well, not really. Look, it's a 17-point lead when you do a two-way. It's only like a, within the sampling error, 10% lead. By the way, the poll that came out yesterday, I believe, was Trump plus 8 in the full ballot. So it's about 2-3 point difference. Very, very, very similar. So again, I argue to you this, not argue, I tell you, I am telling you, I am right. When a national lead is this big, states are not going to just exist in some vacuum. They're not an island unto themselves, unencumbered or uninfluenced by the events on the homeland. It's not how it is. Never worked that way. It will not work that way this time. It is not working that way this time. Texas as well, due to, again, females in areas of Texas. The Fort Worth area. Harris County. Parker is Trump country. Terrence, big population areas that Trump technically lost by a little bit, even though it is still supposed to be a red county. Due to his rebound in areas like this, Texas is a blowout right now. There are actually more someone else's when you add up Nikki Haley, Vivek, Mike Pence, Asa, and Larry Elder get nothing. But they get like 0.3, 0.6, things like that. When you add up everybody else and then the someone else choice, it is slightly higher than the vote share that Ron DeSantis is getting on his own in the state of Texas. Ron DeSantis gets 17.4%. The combined someone else is 18.7%. Even if, and the undecided is very little, 3.7%. I kicked myself in the butt because we started the survey and I didn't put the two-way push on the Texas questionnaire. And I was so pissed, kicking myself over it. But as you can see, Trump is dominant. 60.2 to 17.4. A lot of delegates in Texas, folks. A lot of delegates. A lot of delegates in Florida and in the governor's own home state where he's losing. Census changes things, including electoral votes and delegate counts. California will be next. It was one of the closer states. It is not that close right now. But it is one of Trump's weaker states. But again, even if DeSantis convinced every single one of the 18.17% of someone else to vote for him, and even if every single voter of that 3.7% decided, I'm not going to go with Donald Trump, and the 18.7%, every single one of them decided, I'm not going to go with Donald Trump, he's still going to get 60% of the vote. It's still not possible to beat him in that state. And in truth, what's really going to happen? Well, what's really going to happen is he's probably going to take, let's be conservative. Let's say he takes half of each. He's over a supermajority. Over a supermajority. And it probably won't hurt him that in the CNN town hall, when the guy got up, New Hampshire voter got up and said, Mr. President, what are you going to do to reduce the cost of gas in this country and fix this energy issue we're having? Because the Northeast is getting killed with the cost of energy increasing. What was Trump's response? Drill, baby, drill. Got a standing ovation. Probably is not going to hurt him in a state like Texas, since they'll benefit from that. I really can't impress upon all of you how significant these numbers are. Even if, by the way, we were a poll that was less bullish on Trump from November to January, and then from January to April and May, now March, April, and May. Like, we had him lower than other people. When people had him at 55, we had him at 52, 51, 50. We were just the first ones to show that he was going to hit 60. We were the first ones to show that DeSantis was going to fall below 20. And again, the media polls, the consensus, if you have an online component and you're able to reach the lower propensity, lower participation voter, that most certainly is going to vote in this primary because Donald Trump is running for president, but otherwise may not, you're going to see DeSantis' weakness with those voters. If you're only doing phone polling, especially live caller phone polling, you're going to get a more educated, traditional Republican sample, and it may look like DeSantis is close still, or closer. The ABC Washington Post poll is a perfect example. They have a major history of missing Trump vote. They did actually very well in the midterm in 2022, or at least the national poll did well. Even in 2018, their national poll was good. The House vote poll was good. Their state polls sucked. In 2016, their national polls sucked. Their state polls sucked. In 2020, their national polls sucked. Their state polls sucked. They're the Biden plus 17 Wisconsin poll. The NBC poll, another one just like it, Hart Research, who happened to pair with public opinion strategies. How could you poll for the DeSantis super PAC, not release your crosstabs, and then partner with a media organization and pretend as if there's no conflict of interest there? If I polled for the Trump campaign, or any campaign, and then the Epoch Times wanted me to also poll, the answer was no. You can't do that. Or a PAC supporting a campaign involved in that election. It's not ethical to take that job. Somebody's got to go. In fact, I would argue once you already work for that PAC supporting a candidate or the candidate themselves, that disqualifies you from partnering with a media campaign to poll that election. Disqualified. We did the public polling project in 2020 at states, tracking states, did a great job, and poll for the Epoch Times. Some of those states we polled, at different times, but the same states. We did the Rust Belt poll for the Epoch Times, by the way. Nailed it. But we didn't do them at the same time. And that would have been all right even if we did, because they were all for you and independent. So those polls are going to have DeSantis higher, because even in our live phones, you can clearly see DeSantis doing better. Why? It's older. It's more educated. He has no support among younger Republicans. And when I say younger, I mean under 50. And if you have anything below a 4-year degree, he's got no support. Very, very weak support. Again, by groups, you can see it here. So, of course, they're going to have him in the 20s if they're skewing the live caller. In fact, the live caller is closer to 30s. It's just that with the other modes combined, it brings it down to 21.5, 22.1. Of course, it has to be calibrated and rate weighted, but you know what I mean. All right. And the bottom line is here. It will absolutely overstate how well one candidate versus Trump is doing with, like, say, independents and, like, say, suburban voters. It's already 1 o'clock, so I'm trying to move it along here. The fact of the matter is, and I'll go back to super chats and tips and rants. I'll go back there and grab them up. And I know Laura's not here with me right now, but if you're ranting on Rumble, and by the way, if you are watching Rumble and either you watch Rumble or you watch on YouTube, both, if you want to support us, that's great. Just the Rumble is much better. You're giving a lot less money to Rumble if you give to YouTube in a super chat. All right. So YouTube takes quite a bit. So just remember that. All right. So, but I'll go back and I'll look at it. And locals, same thing with the tips. And I see the tipsters. I'll go back. K-Tugs. All right. D-Weege, you guys, I'll go back and I'll hit up your questions if they're questions. All right. So just bear with me while I chug through this stuff. Let's look up the candidate specific vote first as a percentage, and then we're going to look them up on the crosstab together. Okay. So let me bring them up on the crosstab so I have it ready to go when we go over the chart, and I could just pop it off and show you. And we'll also look quickly at the top line of the Democratic nomination. But okay, so I should have put the total on there. Let me just give you the total for Republican primary, eligible Republican primary voters. They could be Republicans. There are some states that are closed primaries. There are semi-closed primaries like North Carolina. And then there are open primaries like Texas. All right. Closed would be Florida. Only Republicans can vote. Semi-closed is North Carolina. You can vote if you do it within a certain time. And then, of course, Texas is just open. Anybody can vote. So the primary vote screen needs to be a little bit more sophisticated than what I'm seeing from other pollsters. Like, are you going to vote in the Republican primary? Like, what the hell are you talking about? That's not – there are independents where there shouldn't be independents in some of these, without a doubt. Which, of course, by the way, would bring Trump down. All right. So why? Because it's going to make the electorate more moderate. And that electorate may not even be eligible to vote in the primary. You understand? You have to know what state it is the person is you're talking to. And then we ask whether or not you're a caucus goer, a primary voter too. I mean, so you're asking just about a primary. Somebody in Iowa and Nevada is going to be like, we have caucus here, dummy. Thinking about the general election. If first choice does not receive the Republican nomination, would you vote for the party's nominee, consider voting for the Democratic nominee, or not vote at all? And as I said on Wednesday, we heard you guys loud and clear. I took your criticisms. I think you're right. And I think it should say, consider voting for another party nominee. Either Democratic, if it's a Republican, because it changes, because we also asked this of Democrats with Kennedy and Biden as well, which we're going to talk about. So the question is, it's called piping, right? So there's logic and then there's piping. Logic is based on other answers, whether or not these people get posed a certain question. So obviously we're not going to ask this question of people who say they're not voting in the primary. That's logic. Piping is, did you choose Ron DeSantis? as a Republican, your choice for the Republican nomination. Okay. Then when we read you this question, first choice is going to say, if Ron DeSantis does not receive the nomination. If you chose Donald Trump, then piping will make it say, if Donald Trump, you understand? That's piping. All right. I would vote for the party's nominee totally, which I should have put on this chart and I didn't, is 67.3% of eligible potential Republican primary voters. I would consider voting for the other party nominee is 19.9% total. All right. And I would not vote at all is 12.8%. That's, Democrats are lower than this. They were a little bit higher last time, but they're lower now. It's kind of interesting to see how that plays out. But when you look by candidate, this is what you get. 65.2% of Trump voters said they would vote for the party's nominee, the Republican Party's nominee. 16.2% said they would consider voting for another nominee. 18.7% said they would not vote at all. Now that is up from 12, 13%. We're now approaching 20% of Trump voters who say they will not vote if Donald Trump is not the nominee. The 16.2 is actually, I went back and looked at some of the stuff we did in 16. Was a little different, but it told us about 10 to 15% was normal for both Hillary Clinton and different Republican candidates. Bernie Sanders was a little bit high, and that ended up being the case. So Bernie had voters who were likely to vote for the other party if a certain person got that nomination and if Bernie wasn't the nominee. So we see something very similar in the Democratic primary here, and we'll talk about that more. But right now, let's just focus on Republicans. DeSantis's vote, 76.5% said they'll still vote for the Republican nominee, no matter who it is. Only 3% say they will not vote at all. So it's not like there's this DeSantis or bust vote. That's within that's about the sampling error of the survey. 21%, which is above what is normal, said they will consider voting for another nominee. So DeSantis doesn't have a DeSantis or bust vote. DeSantis has a DeSantis or Biden vote. Again, he who lives in glass houses maybe should not throw stones. Because the line is with this, when we started doing this, what I read on my Twitter timeline and elsewhere were anti-Trump, mostly DeSantis supporters, saying that Trump voters are a cult and they'll only vote for Trump because they're a cult. That is not true. They'll only vote for Trump because they don't think either party is good. They've looked at Republican presidents, they've looked at Democratic presidents, and for the most part, their life has continued to get shittier no matter who has been in the White House. The country has continuously declined no matter who had been in the White House. So for them, it's like, okay, Bob Dole or Bill Clinton, whatever. Very much like a Ross Perot voter, which was about 20% non-white. It has the potential to be even less white now. Which is interesting when we look at, okay, if you did lose some of these suburban voters, how could you make that up? You could make it up with the missing voter Sean Trendy always talked about. By slicing off several points in urban areas and squeezing the hell out of the rural vote. You're not going to get killed in the suburb if you're going to do that anyway. Because guess what? Some of these people live in the burbs. You mean they're not just educated white women who watch Sally Jesse Raphael in the burbs? No, there aren't. And actually, those aren't the worst for Republicans. Professional class women with no kids are the worst. Educated women who live in urban to metro suburban areas who are married to their job. You guys know who I'm talking about. Or a single and overeducated, underpaid, have student loan debts, have had at least one abortion. That's just the truth. I mean, the idea that someone is going to win this vote because they're not Donald Trump is friggin' laughable. Do I have to put up Arizona again, the trend? Republicans did no better without Trump on the ballot in those areas. No better. In fact, the only time it arrested was when Trump was on the damn ballot. It's ridiculous. It's so stupid. All right, let's go back to the Trump or bust candidate specific is what we call it to identify the Trump or bust. Pence, 78.8% will vote for the nominee. 15% would consider voting for another nominee. So that, I mean, look, folks, that is, again, within what we saw as normal last time. When it looks, when you're looking at Biden, okay, because here are the Democrats. When you're looking at Biden, 76.6% say they will vote for the party's nominee. 14.2%, very similar to Trump and Pence, say that they will consider voting for the Republican nominee or another nominee. Because I think that some people probably, when we're polling, not the way we worded it, some people probably are thinking third party. I think that's worth pointing out. And I'm trying to look at just the N equal numbers. Hold on, because I got to get, well, I'm going to show you the crosstab anyway, because it's the only way I can prove what I'm saying is to show you the count for these numbers. What do these numbers represent? All right. Look at Kennedy's. Now, Kennedy is at what, 15%, something like that in our poll, close to it. So obviously it's a smaller number, but the more Kennedy grows in support, the bigger the vulnerability here is for the Democratic Party, which gets us to our CNN town hall. The downside was clear. It's a CNN town hall, and CNN is going to do what Caitlin Collins tried to do. By the way, did you know Caitlin Collins once tweeted about FAGs? And also how when she was in college and didn't realize she'd one day be in the public spotlight, how she was upset that she had a room with a lesbian. So anyway, it's just so pretentious, these people. That's why I bring it up. It's the only reason why I bring it up. They're pretentious. But the point was not to shore up a suburban white educated female vote. Shore up a vote you're never going to shore up. The point was to try to reach some of those suburban voters who are voting for Robert Kennedy. Urban voters, rural voters, anywhere who are voting for RFK, but as you can clearly see, 42% of them say they will consider voting for another nominee. And guess what? There's synergy there, and that other nominee, let's be real, is only Donald Trump. Barnes and I talked about this on What Are the Odds in great detail. They are not going to vote for a Republican. They may vote third party, but if Trump's the Republican nominee, they would vote for him. Many of them, 10.7% said they would not vote at all. Where was Bernie? Bernie was about 12 to 20%. And we used to ask specifically in states. Oh, David, you're in for a treat. Laura just gave me something. If you're listening right now, oh boy, you are in for a treat. She just gave me something to taste test. Oh my goodness. Now, granted, Bernie had a bigger base of support right now than RFK does. So, I would vote for some other nominee being bigger for Kennedy shows even bigger upside if his support continues to grow. If, let's say, the 40% of Democratic primary voters who voted for Bernie Sanders, 10% of them said they were going to vote for Donald Trump, that's 4%. But if, damn near half of Kennedy's 20% said they would vote for Donald Trump, That's 10%. So even though Kennedy was a weaker primary challenge, and of course he's going up against an incumbent. Hillary Clinton she wasn't in the White House, even though she was also could be considered a known quantity and had a machine. The difference here too is kind of funny. Who is supporting Kennedy? See, Biden has the liberal progressive vote. Kennedy has the classical liberal vote. And there's actually some interesting across the board education numbers. And where they are is also interesting. We'll show you. Because the synergy with Trump's voters is very, very clear. And that was the upside to the CNN town hall. All right. Now, the only way for me to show you by numbers how much bigger one is than the other, then I have to show you this. All right. Because, I mean, ideally, you want everyone to sing Kumbaya and hold hands if you're trying to get your nomination together, right? You don't want to fight like this because you don't want to lose, even if DeSantis is talking about 3% of the total vote and Trump's is way bigger, 13, 14%. You don't want to lose that 3. Then all you're doing is being the spoiler, right? That's all you're doing is taking a small sector of the electorate. You had no chance of winning, and you're trying to take a slice of the electorate away from that party nominee and cost them the election so you can later say, I told you so. That's a hell of a baby game you're playing. All right, let's take a look at this. Let's remove this, and let's put up the crosstab, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I know it's small. Give me a minute, especially since it's this small. Let me zoom in. All right, that's pretty good. All right, so of all the interviews here, the 18.7% of Trump's voters that said, I will not vote at all, the Trump or bust vote, which has grown significantly since we started, N equals 160. Literally 7 people we spoke to who support Ron DeSantis said they would not vote if he's not the nominee. That's it. Now, what about the DeSantis or, which we jokingly call over here, the DeSantis or Biden crybaby vote? All right. That is, and I love some of you. You know, I know you who you guys are. I'm not mocking you personally. It's just, get over it. It's funny. All right. N equals 49. So what I'm saying is, to get at how many of these coveted, suburban, educated women we're talking about here would vote for Ron DeSantis but not vote for Donald Trump, it's not even worth looking at suburbia overall, the demographics overall, because frankly, he's killing DeSantis in the suburbs right now. He's beating Joe Biden in the suburbs right now. He's not that far behind Joe Biden with suburban. He's winning with suburban men. Let me just look real quick so I can give you this. Let me give you the exact number, okay? And this is registered voters. This would be registered. It would not be the that's Biden versus DeSantis. That would not be, so the number I'm going to give you right now is not a likely voter model at all, okay? It's simply a, let's go to area. Did I nest area with, I thought I nested area with let me nest area with gender, okay? Come on, scroll down. Those are the columns. Let me take survey demographics. Let's take area first. Put it in here, drop it in here. Let's take women, or not just women. Let's take gender in general, and let's nest it with area. There we go. All right, so we close this up. We select the new demographic. We look at just Trump v. Biden. So among suburban women, Trump is ahead by 2 points. Among suburban men, Trump is ahead by 6 points. Among rural men, Trump is winning by 40 points. Among rural women, Trump is ahead by 35 points. Among urban women, Trump is getting killed by, actually, it's not even that much. 20 points. Among urban men, it is single digits because of this vote, by the way, which a lot of it is non-white. With the likely voter model, it would be interesting to see how that changes. All right, but again, the more relevant measure is people who tell us they would vote for Ron DeSantis, but they would not vote for Donald Trump. Because, of course, they want you to look at the entire country and every single suburb in it. That is not the relevant question. Trump's bust vote, the Trump or bust vote, is more than, here's the headline, the Trump or bust vote is more than 3 times the size of the I would vote for DeSantis, but not Trump vote. In fact, if you add the DeSantis to Biden vote, the DeSantis or Biden vote, with the DeSantis or bust vote, the Trump or bust vote is just under 3 times the size of the combined, the sum of the DeSantis or bust and the DeSantis or Biden. Do you understand what I'm telling you right now? Do you understand the significance of what I'm telling you right now? Which would you rather lose? It's simple math. And I'll ask you this even more. I'll pose this question further, this follow-up question. Which do you think would be easier to reduce if you were on the out of the money side of this equation? So if you're Trump and you're trying to win over some of those voters, is it easier for Trump to do that than it is for Ron DeSantis or Mike Pence or Vivek or any of these others to win over the Trump or bust vote? Who's more rigid? Well, we can look back at 6 electoral cycles, 6 years of electoral cycles to be able to answer that question. 4 elections, 16, 18, 20, and 22, over a 6-year period. In some cases, 16, Trump did better with these women than the polls expected him to do. He still did better, by the way, in 2020 than polls expected. It's just he didn't do good enough, right? Or supposedly. And in 2016, he did better than expected, and he did good enough. He won suburban white women by about the margin he's beating Biden by right now. Hillary Clinton said, "You ladies let your husband tell you how to vote," remember? Now, in both those cycles, the Trump or bust vote came out. In 2018, Republicans without Trump on the ballot lost those women, and the Trump or bust vote did not vote. In 2022, Republicans did better with those women, and the Trump or bust vote did not come out. How did it pan out in 18? It was a wipeout for Republicans in the House, thanks to Donald Trump saving the Senate. They put up the best incumbent party first term, midterm performance in the Senate since JFK was president. And I say this all the time because it's true. One more, and McSally, for instance, in Arizona, or Manchin in West Virginia, one more win you would have had to go back to FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to find a party that was a first-term incumbent party doing that well in the Senate for a first-term incumbent midterm election. In 2022, it wasn't a wipeout for Republicans, but they underperformed in the House, even though they took control of the House, and they very significantly underperformed in the Senate level. Why is it more significant to look at the Senate? Contrary to the argument my brother Steve Cortez made. Love you, Steve, but I'm about to bury your logic here. The presidential election is a collection of states. An election after election after election. It is not a single national popular vote election, and districts are not swayed. I mean, they're not swayed like the districts are by the popular vote. They are more comparable to the presidential election because the presidential election is a collection of individual elections at the state level. So you do better with those white women, but you still lose because you didn't get the Trump or bust vote. So you did not win the election in Nevada, the Senate election. You nearly lose Wisconsin. If Ron Johnson was not an incumbent named Ron Johnson, he was going to lose. You narrowly lose Pennsylvania. You lose Arizona. You lose Georgia. This is problematic. It's end game. Joe Biden's been reelected. Swallow the whole, Republicans, swallow the lump in your throat. Joe Biden has been reelected. Despite the fact that the census has changed the electoral map. I just outlined the 3 states Republicans needed. They got 1, they lost 2. It is easier for Donald Trump to, let me put it this way. It is easier for Donald Trump to win the White House in 2024 than it was for him to win in 2016 or 2020. Why? The census has changed electoral votes. The Northeast, California, and the Midwest, because the West in general is not losing population, it's California. And those electoral votes have gone to Republican states and states that Republicans do have a chance to win. So instead of needing Iowa, Ohio, North Carolina, etc., and then you need to run the table, because Florida's off the table. Doesn't matter if it's DeSantis or Trump, both would carry the state of Florida. And that is because of the demographic shift that Florida's undertaken, not because of anybody being a governor. State-to-state migration slowed under Ron DeSantis. The boom occurred mostly under Rick Scott, and then the final 2 years of Trump's presidency and the beginning of Ron DeSantis' first term was actually a slowdown. What was infused into South Florida was due to Venezuelan policy and Cuban policy. That was Trump. And now they have a ton of new naturalized citizens that are eligible to vote, and they vote Republican. But the Northeast and all those big blue wall states used to be Democrats started out 240 electoral votes right off the bat. They no longer do. And all Republicans need to do, well, all Donald Trump needs to do, because frankly, he is favored at this point, but it's also very simple. Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. You don't need Michigan. You don't need Pennsylvania. Trump carried in 2016. Narrowly lost in 2020. He doesn't need them. He needs a state he lost by like 6,000 votes. That's it. And that's 270. That's without Maine 2, which would push him up. That's without Nebraska. Excuse me. Yeah, Nebraska too. You don't need him. Which, by the way, was another pure and simple example of Republicans blowing a stronghold because they don't understand that economics is politics. What happened to that district in a ruby red state? What happened to it? Why did Joe Biden carry it? Why has it been slipping away from Republicans since George W. Bush's reelection? Because financial services. Because they pumped a service sector economy that needed a professional class in a tiny district. And a bunch of people from out of state moved in with advanced degrees who like people folding their laundry, who like illegals mowing their lawns. Stupid. Very stupid. And as far as Georgia goes, I just showed you Arizona. There is no evidence to suggest anybody else would do better in Arizona. It's a hard state, but it can be done. Republicans should be taking the $500 million that they intend to use to smear each other until the nomination, until the convention. And they should build a vote harvesting operation or vote gathering operation. One that I have been advocating, for instance, and designing to close the gap with Democrats. And they need to do it in a select number of counties in 3 battleground states. Personally, if Trump is the nominee, I think it's worth the money to do it in Pennsylvania as well, because Donald Trump can win the state of Pennsylvania. He can win Michigan too. It's just harder. Republicans are not brain dead in certain parts of Pennsylvania, and they have been taking my advice. And they're about to have, they already have some results to show for it, but they're about to have even more. It can be done. Which we're going to go over when we, in the next couple of weeks, we're actually going to start to show you some test experiments. Especially if you have somebody like Trump who was anti-mail-in voting, advocating, because the research is very clear. Voters from parties follow the strategies of their party when it comes to the vote method or mode of voting, whatever you want to call it, the vehicle which they use to vote. So, for instance, Republicans used to advocate in Florida to vote by absentee ballot. Republicans would swamp Democrats with absentee ballots, while Democrats would swamp Republicans with early in-person voting. Why? Because Democrats would push that. And then election day, typically dominated by Republicans, would put the Republican over in very tight elections. Then it changed, and Republicans started saying vote early and vote in person. And Democrats did better in the mail-in voting when Republicans crushed them and in-person early voting. And then, of course, on election day, Republicans bitch smacked them, and that was it. I mean, voters follow the strategy that the party and their leaders lay out. And with somebody who has as big of a microphone, as big of a bullhorn, as big of a bully pulpit as Donald Trump has, if Donald Trump is the nominee and there are efforts in place like we have designed and looked and discussed, Republican voters can be convinced to close the gap with early voting. But it's going to take an enormous amount of money. Ronna McDaniel blew $1 billion on a so-called permanent data operation that has significant database latency issues. What I mean by that is stale information. It's supposed to be permanent. That's supposed to mean you're supposed to follow up with it. The Republican choice system, campaign sidekick, is disgustingly terrible. So you wouldn't even be able, this is the task ahead of these people, you wouldn't even be able to build it based on what they already have. That needs to be matched, deduped, and cleaned before you can even move forward. Anyway, as you can see here by looking at this chart, and I know Laura hates it when I keep these charts up, and you don't need to see me. You want to see the actual numbers. You can literally add all of these together from every single candidate, and it still will not be combined a total number of votes that comes anywhere near the vote that will be lost, according to voters, if Donald Trump is not the nominee. When you're talking about the electorates, you combine them all, you're looking at about 7-8%, depending on whether or not you count some of these statistically insignificant people. Donald Trump's, the Trump or bust vote alone is 15%. And I mean 15% of the total projected electorate. They have no chance. No chance. This is very cold, calculated, and objective analysis. This isn't advocacy. It's right in front of your face. They have zero chance of beating Joe Biden. Not zero, but they would need a major drop-off, because let's go to the Democratic nomination. And let's look at Joe Biden's. And let's look at Robert Kennedy's. Kennedy's starting to amass a pretty significant number here, but as a percentage, it's not enough to offset. Like if Kennedy's people bailed and Marianne Wilson's people bailed, and even some of this 14% went over to I would consider voting for another party's nominee. Folks, 113 plus 69. I mean, really, that's really the number we're dealing with here, not the percentages. Marianne Williamson's very, very small figures, and the someone else figure, that's kind of big too. I mean, it's up there with Robert Kennedy's, but I mean, combined, it's nowhere near the amount you would lose if Donald Trump was not on the ticket. That's just objective. Those are the numbers, not my opinion. Those are the numbers. There is no comparison. Bannon's right. What did he say? I mean, I forgot what he said, but all the king's horses and all the king's men with the Keebler Elf couldn't put together 74 million votes. They can't. It's not there. It's not there. And Biden, Democrats, they're going to harvest. I'm telling you. As of right now, it's certainty to vote. When you look at voting likelihood and Democrats, look at Joe Biden's certainty to vote measure. Look at that, folks. Look at that. This early? Holy crap. That's not normal. Look at DeSantis is higher. He's got a smaller amount, though, so it makes it statistically Bob. That's why Kennedy's and Marianne Williamson's I didn't really pay much attention to as well, but Trump's on par with it. 857 interviews. Okay, not 200 and change. Biden, 800 interviews. Actually, Trump's a little bit higher, but they're both so close, it doesn't matter. Even if DeSantis' voters are more likely, the electorate is still less. So if you have 90% of your overall support certain to vote, and your overall support is 65 million, okay, let's just say 88% of 75, 80 million is more. It's not debatable. This is not debatable. So let's look at education. Let's look at some Democratic numbers here. All right. So overall, we do have Robert Kennedy coming up from 3%. It wasn't much at all. But basically, let's pull this up here. 13%, something like that. It's up from 3. He's definitely gaining. There's no doubt about it. But what the issue is that Joe Biden has reached now in the shorter. He didn't go that much higher in our previous polling when you had, him versus Kennedy. And we forgot about Marianne Williamson. I'm sorry we did. So that's why I'm not including it in the trend at all. It's a throwaway, I guess, at this point. But in the crowded field, Biden's in the 30s. In the shorter field, he gained, but he didn't gain this much. Now he's around where Trump is. And it is unheard of for a candidate even this early. Again, yes, even this early in the nomination process, it is unheard of for a candidate at 60% to lose the nomination. So, to me, the only question is, how do you appeal to the soon-to-be disenfranchised RFK voter? Who appeals to them? How do you put a plan in place to appeal to them? Or do you, not bother with any of that and spend time ripping each other's throats out so the grift can make $30 million? I guess they're looking to go the other way on that. High school or less, to 4-year degree is remarkably stable with Robert Kennedy Jr.'s support. He does have less support among those who have an advanced degree. I'm not at all surprised. Let's look by region. If you look, it is a little bit higher in the South, but the Northeast and Midwest are higher than the West. Not at all surprised. I would have actually expected Robert Kennedy Jr.'s support to be higher in the Northeast than in the South, but you're considering New York and Pennsylvania in there with the Northeast, so I guess that probably is a stronger area for Biden, who with Black voting support, I would have thought would have been a little bit, this would have been lower, but there you have it. I think Kennedy will take states like, he's going to New Hampshire, Massachusetts. He could probably obviously take. We'll see, though. We'll see. New Hampshire is going to be pissed that Democrats are shafting them, so Joe Biden cannot be embarrassed in Iowa and New Hampshire. But Kennedy does have a chance in some of these other states out west that are younger. Right now, though, if you look by age detail, Biden is doing better with older voters. Kennedy's got younger voters, but still he hasn't really been able to smash through, beat Biden with any specific group. The older vote, which I would have thought, it depends where they are, and it depends whether they're secular or not. If they're secular, they're for Biden. If they're older and Catholic, Kennedy does a little bit better with them. And if they're older Catholic and in the Northeast, Kennedy does better than them. And in the Midwest, Kennedy does better with them. Ironically, his Southern support comes from younger voters, younger non-white voters, which are interesting. But again, if you look by race, he needs to press into this age group. I mean, he needs to press into this demographic. You cannot win a Democratic nomination if you get killed with Black voters. The Democratic nomination will be at least 40% non-white, at least. All right? As you can see here, that's about what we're looking at, right? 33% non-white, it's ballpark, something like that. 35, 40, yeah, that's about right. Look by party. There are some Republicans who will vote in the Democratic primary, as there are some Democrats who will vote in the Democratic primary. As long as they are eligible in that state to do so, we will survey them. Democrats are voting heavily for Joe Biden. The independent other vote is a problem for Joe Biden. Third-party voters and non-affiliated voters, that's a problem. That's where Robert Kennedy has made his inroads, as he has with voters who are Republican and are voting in the Democratic primary. I know people like this. Our buddy Mark. He is obviously one of these voters. Yes, he's a registered Democrat, but I don't think he holds views that really mimic the modern Democratic vote, right? Even though he lives out in California, he's one of these, I would say, or, he registered as a Democrat, I know, but Kennedy's inability to break into the Democratic voter is what is holding him back in our polling. All right, you look by ideology. This shouldn't surprise you that Kennedy is doing better than any other vote with the conservative vote, especially since the conservative independents, third-party voters, and Republican voters who plan to participate if they're eligible in a Democratic primary are actually more favorable to Kennedy. This is an issue, though, and I agree with Spencer Kimball. I heard an interview with him with Real Clear Politics. I agree with him. Most of the insurgent Democratic nomination candidacies have come from the left. And as of right now, Joe Biden is winning the progressive vote, and he's winning it handily. Robert Kennedy Jr.'s share of the progressive vote is less than his national average. So his support is being drawn from moderates and from conservatives even more so. So he's got the potential to do some damage, but right now it's an issue. And you can see that there are some voters who make some decent money that are backing Kennedy at a higher than average rate, but it's weird. It's like you got some of that, I'm not rich, but I'm doing better than most Americans. the rich go for Biden, and then you have the working class where Kennedy draws the most, equal, but that is his two best groups. I find that interesting, Let's see, what else is interesting? Let's look by religion. Again, as you can see by Catholic here, Kennedy does best with people who are Catholic and people who have some other religion. Joe Biden does better with the secular voters overall and Protestants, which is not, a small chunk still. It's not obviously what it used to be with the Democratic religion in general. Is not what it used to be with the Democratic vote. But Kennedy's got to break into that Protestant, same issue that is old, or he just needs to dominate with Catholics. Joe Biden happens to be Catholic as well, though, so it's different. This isn't the 60s anymore. All right. What else? By gender, Kennedy Jr. does much, much better among men Democratic primary voters. And area. In the suburbs and in the rural areas, he's doing better than in the urban areas. Interesting enough, the insurgent candidacy of Bernie was in the suburbs and in the rural area. Hillary Clinton won urban progressive areas, blue urban areas. Bernie won progressive rural college areas and suburbanites who were more progressive. By 2020, he had lost those voters to Donald Trump. That's how Trump increased his share with the rural vote. It also couldn't hurt when you look at states like Georgia and Arizona. It's just that they're different than Bernie's Midwestern kind of vote. All right, but certainly didn't hurt. Maybe that's why Donald Trump did so much better with the independent moderate than some of these others, or independent conservatives than some of these others. McSally, for instance. And then later, Blake Masters, for instance. But by area, this is the potential. Don't you want to try to take these voters? So if you can't win back the educated white woman who is who's a Biden voter, who is, voting Democrat now and has been, consistently, even though some of them swung back to Republicans in 2022, not enough. Again, that's the lesson. Not enough of them did. If you can't do that, don't you think you should look for other coalitions and get them to participate in these areas and increase your share of the overall vote in those areas? Isn't that wise? Can't you counter them with the 90 interviews we conducted with Kennedy's voters in the suburbs? Large share of them, I believe it was 60, or 50 something, and said they would not vote, or they would vote for another party's nominee. Don't you think that's a smart way to go about this? Because you're going to chase them away if you pull like a Romney kind of, I'm going to win those votes back in the suburbs. I'm going to win Franklin County. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I just don't understand what people are having a hard time wrapping their heads around. I just don't get it, folks. I don't get it. And the Hispanics, it's very, very, very small, so not really worth looking into. But you can see Kennedy does better with Cubans, Mexicans. But again, very, very small. Asians also very, very small. Kennedy did better with, obviously didn't with some of the more conservative ones. Joe Biden crushing the Democratic Chinese vote. Shocker. Of course. Those are his donors. I couldn't help myself. They're giving his brother Jim all that money. Of course he is. What else did I miss here? Did I miss anything? I don't think so. Race and education. Yeah, that's probably worth looking at. Again, remarkably similar to overall education, right? White, non-Hispanic, same thing. And if he's going to make a run for anything, it's got to be among this group first. It has to be. Because he's not going to win the educated non-white vote. It's not going to happen. Well, some of it, but not enough. And there we have it. Kennedy's voters also, too, again, are just not, they're not as likely. And that's a different way. What really should look like this. Hold on. There we go. So Joe Biden's voters are definitely going to vote. Kennedy's voters are still kind of mulling it. Some of them are kind of mulling it. By the way, if you look at that with the Republican presidential nomination, oops, what the hell am I doing? Which many of you probably already did before you even got on this. You can see that there's some vote with Trump that, they're not sure. It really does depend, because this is the 2024 general. It really does depend on whether or not Trump is the nominee, and then they will decide. That should scare people. Really should scare people. Where else? By region. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty consistent. Midwest, though, this time. South got a population boom. And then also remember how we define the South. States like Delaware, Maryland, even Washington, D.C. are considered the South in ours and in traditional exit polls. So don't forget that. That's why we have a little bit, though, higher share, because there's been such an influx into the South, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, so, and that's another one of the beefs. So, North Carolinians in the East were flipping out. We were undercounted. We were undercounted. Now you know why. It matters. It matters for redistricting. Sandy Smith should most definitely be a congresswoman right now, because the map should have been written the way it should have been written. That's why she's running again, by the way, and she has a much better chance of winning in 2024, especially if Trump is on the ticket, by the way, because you're going to have those counties where there's still registered Democrats outnumbering Republicans, and yet Trump is in the 60s. And Tillis isn't. Even though he did a little bit better, he did because some of Trump's vote went to him, but not all of Tillis's vote went to Trump. As I've said a million times, without a doubt, the Republicans get more from Trump than Trump gets from them. All right, cool. So, Adam, maybe you covered this, but Trump brought in voters who never voted. Do you know the breakdown of those new voters in 2016? I don't have it here, Adam. That's a great question. But yes, there were some non-white. In 16, it was much whiter, though, than what we saw in 2020, which was new non-white vote that voted for Trump. In 2016, depends, too, what you call a new voter, because a lot of them had been old enough to vote for Bush v. Gore, for instance, or even Bush v. Gore and Bush v. Kerry, but then stopped voting. And that voter came back, and that's why you saw, for instance, southeastern Ohio. There were, areas like that were greatly impacted. Appalachia, parts of Pennsylvania that are considered Appalachia were impacted. North Carolina was impacted pretty significantly. Out west, there were a lot of still registered Democrats that, had been voting here and there at the presidential level for Republicans, but they gave up, they quit. It was a lot in the Midwest, but they were more white. And I have a more detailed breakdown of that, actually, but I'd have to go and pull it out, drag it out. I wonder if I still actually was in SurveyMonkey of all places, but yeah, I wonder. I'd have to see. But I'll look into it. I'll see if I can pull it up. Norm, if Trump really wants to get the economy going again fast, is putting a moratorium of overtime taxes for a period of time. Or you're suggesting that, Norm? Yeah, it's not a bad. I remember when Republicans used to be for tax moratoriums instead of doing all the dumb shit they're doing now. But that seems to have, they once upon a time forced Barack Obama to do something very much like that, Norm. Did I miss anybody else's over here? I mean, I know there's a lot of others. I just want to make sure I get, I want to jip anybody. All right, let's see. Cugs, any thoughts on the 2024 Arizona Senate race? Yeah, I think Kari Lake is the going away favorite. I just clicked away the other tip thing. I'm sorry, guys. Hold on. Kari Lake is the going away favorite. And even with Lamb in the race, she very well may consider running. I think it's stupid or foolish to carry out. I think that she would do it. It's just that right now she's still in the middle of a gubernatorial election contest and contesting the election contest. And, if I know Carrie, she doesn't think it's right to abandon that to run for Senate, and she's going to see one. That's Carrie Lake, folks. And, if you like people who finish what they start, then Arizona, you got gypped because she's someone who sees things through, and she's going to see that through. That's who she is. That's who Carrie is. But I do think that it's going to be a difficult race. Sinema will be an independent, even with her and, what's his name starts with a G, the Democrat. It will be a tough competitive race. It will. Arizona is basically a 50-50 state now. And, it's going to be, I think Lamb would put up a better fight than Lake against Sinema? No, I don't. Because all of those so-called moderates that Republicans are arguing they're going to win, many of them are going to go for Sinema. That's why Democrats want her out of the race. So it'll be a question of base turnout. Based on your current polling on head-to-heads between Trump and Biden, and by the way, I'll just tell you right now, we have registered voters actually better than likely voters for Trump, and I think that obviously is likely voter models weighting decisions. But Trump is actually ahead slightly more with registered voters than likely voters. We're going to have him up it's at least 7 points. I'm just telling you right now, at least. It's looking like could be more. 49-39. I kid you not. And DeSantis, be lucky if it's a tie. I'm not kidding. Not kidding. They're both in the high 30s, low 40s. I don't know if DeSantis even hits the 40. I don't in the registered he doesn't. Likely may boost him and Biden up a bit. Biden, it eases off. Support for Biden eases off about a point when he's against DeSantis because it's, again, that's the impact of name recognition. So it's not that DeSantis is any stronger and that's why Biden has less support. It's that they don't know who he is. So they back off and they say, oh, well, maybe those voters like Mark Mitchell and I repeat this all the time. I'm going to keep repeating it. Those are suspect demographics. They will vote for Joe Biden. Just like Trump, is at high 40s already and has a chance to crack 50 here real soon. But that means the remainder of the undecided, the vast majority will push Biden to, even though the polling shows him low, it will push him to within a few points of Trump. And I do think Trump can carry the popular vote this time. I just don't think it's going to be any more than 2 points. So even though we're not the only ones, there are Trump plus 5s, Trump plus 7s. I'm looking at the demographics of these people. I'm thinking about the vote harvesting advantage that Democrats have. And I know where they're going to do it. There are a lot of votes there. They're going to try to deny the Electoral College no matter what happens with the popular vote, like they did this in 2022. And at the end of the day, it's possible Trump could still win or lose the popular vote, but still win or lose the Electoral College. It's very shaky now. So let me finish what is this, D-Weege? Let me finish your question, D-Weege. All right. And let me see if we still have this. I think I do. Based on your current polling on head-to-heads between Trump and Biden, what states do you think are locks or likely Trump, and which states are more concerning? I'm starting to think a Youngkin or even a Kemp VP could save a win in some of these iffy states. I don't think Kemp's necessary. Why do I say that? Because I'm not the only one. Emerson, Rasmussen, a bunch. For instance, Emerson and I had Walker up. We had him up by 1 point. Okay. And he went, and that was only, I don't know if Emerson polled. They probably did poll the runoff, but I'm talking about the first round. And so let's say we really kind of got it right. I mean, that first round, it's just that nobody got to 50. So give or take a point. Trump was not up a point. Trump was up 11 points. So Trump did better than Walker in the Atlantic metro area. Trump did better in the Atlanta suburbs. Trump did better in South Georgia. Trump did better in North Georgia, and Trump did better in coastal Georgia. I mean, it's just got to remember that. So I'm not sure he needs Kemp. I really don't. And Zucker can't do what he did in 2020. The only thing you have to remember is Democrats with Warnock had so much more money than Walker. Now Warnock was paying $40 an hour to people to go get ballots, and Republicans were stupid and didn't do that. Well, it's not even that they were stupid. I'm sure Walker understood what was going on. It's just they didn't get the money. Like Mitch McConnell was, I don't want to use a word and offend anybody, but it was not coherent. We're supporting him, we're not supporting him. We're supporting him, we're not supporting him. We're supporting him. It was not coherent at all. But I am thinking more and more, D-Weege, about Glenn Youngkin. I really am. I almost feel like Glenn Youngkin, how can I put this? I almost feel like Glenn Youngkin has more opportunity to evolve than a DeSantis at this point, because DeSantis has unfortunately shown that he can be duped pretty easily by these people. And I think that, maybe 4 years as number 2 would change that. But I mean, folks, I'm telling you, again, I wasn't surprised by the Steve Cortez endorsement. I know the thinking that is going into this justification for him running. The flawed assumptions are unbelievable. And for as smart as Steve said he was, he's such a smart guy, I can't believe he would believe some of these ridiculous arguments. If Trump wins, he cannot run in 2028. To believe that is just to deny post-Roosevelt American history and law. I'm just stunned by the stupidity of the idea that if Trump was to lose in 2024, he's going to run again in 2028. I mean, it's just unbelievably. So I don't know. Like I've not seen Youngkin make a decision based off of such a stupid assumption yet. Youngkin is already doing rounds saying, I told you Ron DeSantis wasn't ready for primetime. He's already doing those rounds. I know that. So, but the difference with Youngkin is I don't think he'd be a pretender. I think he'd just say, look, I'm Glenn Youngkin. I'm somewhere in the middle of all this. And maybe he has a chance to, he seems, from what I hear about him, although there were a lot of people who surround DeSantis now were involved with that. And they also had the help of like the Fredericks ground game, out there. But what I hear from him is that he does listen a lot. So I don't know. I'm just looking at the vote shares in Virginia, which I would not put on the board. I wouldn't. It doesn't matter who's the nominee. However, if the election really goes lopsided in one direction and it favors Republicans, when Trump gets that much of a vote statewide, all right, that's enough for a win in most average elections. And it's just amazing that they keep overdoing it. So here it is. Money wins arguments. Ryan, I sadly think you're right with that. And I think that's what it comes down to. And I don't think that it was very smart to take $1 million in the short term for losing your reputation and your future in the mid to long term. I really think that's what it comes down to. All because you didn't get a meeting, all because someone told you to F yourself. Like, this is politics. It's just let me hit the vaporizer after that. It's so disturbing. Actually, I needed water for that, but now I'm going to hit the vaporizer. It's sad because to me, I don't know a single person who did that who doesn't have a personal beef behind it. They all have personal beefs. Like, none of this is about policy or governance or even like the articles that you'll read in, like the arguments you'll read in articles like that. I can tell you, I know for a fact he doesn't believe them. We went over them in great detail. He knows they're totally bull. It's sad. I don't want to keep going on this. What's that AC/DC song? Money down. Dun, 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 dun. And bullshit walks. Right? Isn't that AC/DC? Right? I guess. And I guess, folks. I guess. All right, let's see. Getter. What am I missing? Getter. Who really is the staunch Biden supporter? That's a good question. That's Getter. As you can see in the primary polling, they are pretty much in the Northeast, in the West, which is bad news for Biden. I'll tell you right now. He's weakest in the Midwest and the South. But they are, they like AOC sold out. Like that wing of the party sold out. And the voters, they are, listen, progressives are shockingly surprised or pleasantly surprised by how much progressive achievement they've gotten out of the Biden administration, which they thought would be corporatist. All right. And that's a really good question. Really good question. But it's not like 16 or 2020. It's not. Would picking a female VP, I don't know. Like Carrie Lake, I see a lot of people love her. And by the way, we actually know that from another poll we did with somebody. Carrie Lake is the number one choice for Trump's VP. I'm talking about voters. Carrie Lake, when you ask people, who do you want Trump to pick as VP, and you give them a laundry list, Carrie Lake. And it's not even that close anymore because DeSantis has fallen so significantly. And I'm talking about his rep among faith in flag and populist Republican voters. He's cratered. Did Kennedy make a tactical error by declaring he would not consider running against Trump? No, not right now, because he can't if he wants to win a Democratic primary or he wants to even put up a fight in a Democratic primary. I understand what you're saying, but he's thinking about it like I'm playing to win here. So if you consider the entire Democratic nomination electorate, not the ones that he's bringing in on his own, then it's not a tactical error. Now, that being said, if he starts to win some of these states, these like very, early primary whiter states, let's say he plucks off New Hampshire or he plucks off Massachusetts. Look at how Trump did in places like Dorsetshire, right? Killed it for a Republican, unheard of. Then maybe at some point it's worth that. We'll see, we'll see. But somebody like an Alveda King or something, they've never held office. This is the thing. You got to have somebody who Americans feel confident can take over if Donald Trump was to, and I don't want to say, you got to make sure that they can take over. And I know you could say, well, Kamala Harris is an idiot. Yeah, I know. But she was a senator. She was an attorney general, right? District attorney. So there are all these government experience jobs. Or if you're Trump, it's just like I'm the head of a major multinational billion-dollar corporation. It shows executive experience. If you pick somebody like, we're throwing out these names like Alveda King, even Michelle Obama, folks, like somebody had questioned about that. She's not running, number one. Number two, though, even if she was, she's not going to come across right. It's different when you're a first lady. Hillary Clinton had a lot of people rally to her, too, even after they hated her. They rallied to her because of what happened with her husband. She was super popular during Secretary of State. Then she decided to run for president, and there's a scrutiny. Like I was talking about with DeSantis before. There's a scrutiny that comes along with running for president that you just don't get anywhere else. And Michelle Obama is not a nice person. She's not going to come across as nice and likable, and her favorability is not going to last long. It's not. And then people are going to use that to raise questions, such as, is she even capable or competent enough to be the president? Yeah, her husband was president, but she hasn't done anything. At least Hillary Clinton was a U.S. senator. Hillary Clinton was a Secretary of State. You have to be careful you don't fall into this. Your replacement is not competent or qualified trap. Dan Quayle was a major liability for Herbert Walker Bush. Major liability. But, oh, yeah, good questions. So it's 2:07. Don't forget book club. Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right. We'll also have some other states coming up, which is great. There's a lot in the mix here, folks. A lot in the mix. Planning for Mississippi. Planning for Kentucky. We're going to have a lot. Louisiana, the governor race. We're going to have a lot this year. It's going to be a big year. All right. A lot of polling. It's going to be a big year. Support the Public Polling Project. Share it far and wide. Links in the description. BigDataPoll.com. Scroll down. There's a form right there. You don't even need the direct URL, but the direct URL is in the video description everywhere except for locals, because they know where it is anyway. But share it far and wide. As you can see, we're still below budget, and I just did it because we need polling. We need it. And so what else? What am I missing here? I did another interview with Jeremy. It's going to air on Tuesday, which is pretty cool. He's always got his show is upbeat. It's like, how can you better yourself? How can you be your best kind of self? It's a cool show. And I will tweet it out when it comes out. All right. But we had a great talk, at least a half an hour the other day, and that will be out on Tuesday this week. So I'll share that with you. 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the book club. Don't forget. And we will, of course, put that out to locals members and local supporters and YouTube members. YouTube, you'll get it, a little after 2:00, something like that. But we are reading the ideological origins of the American Revolution. We didn't get through chapter 4 because we got a word on rebellion that we didn't get through, or the logic of rebellion. We finished a note on conspiracy. Sorry. We didn't get through that. This book is great. And then we'll hit chapter 5. We're going to do a note on conspiracy, then have a discussion about the logic of rebellion and a note on conspiracy. And then we're going to save chapter 5 for next week. All right. Sound good? All right. I think that's it. I don't think I'm missing anything. I know Laura's over there breaking her butt and had a hard time getting in and out of this today. But yeah, we will see you. If I miss something, she'll kill me. But we will see you Sunday, book club members. We'll see you Monday, locals. Keep an eye out. Throughout the weekend, we should have some cool little tidbits. I got a little special guest we're going to do a little thing with. All right. I'll see you guys then. All right. All the best. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. Like and share. Like and share.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker.